Hello and welcome everybody, I'm FZN from geekacademics.com, and today I'll show you how you can create your very own overlay for your gaming stream. Before we start with the actual step-by-step tutorial, I'll quickly show you what exactly I mean by overlay, what our goals are, and what materials you need in order to create this thing. Before we start, let me quickly explain what an overlay actually is. An overlay is a nice and easy way to visually enhance your stream. I'm actually running an overlay right now. If I deactivate my overlay, you'll simply only see my screen and my webcam. Like this. If I activate my overlay, you can see how it visually enhances the entire streaming environment. You can create an overlay for pretty much every single game you're using. Of course, you can't see the overlay yourself while you're in-game, but your audience on your stream will see it and therefore will have a better streaming experience while watching you playing. In this tutorial, I will create an overlay for the game Diablo 3, but you can use the same techniques and methods for pretty much every single game you want to use. When we actually finish our overlay, it should look something like this. Now this doesn't show you very much, so let me quickly show you how this would look when you actually use it in action for people on your stream. Before we can actually start creating our overlay, I will show you what materials you should have ready at hand in advance. First of all, you obviously need a program to create your overlay. I'm using Photoshop CS2. This version of Photoshop is an older version and was made available by Adobe for free a couple of months ago. So if you don't have any program to use, I highly recommend using this one. Just Google Photoshop CS2 free download and you should be able to find this. Note that I'm using the German version of Photoshop, so depending on your language, things are probably called differently than in my version. However, all of the icons look the same, and I didn't change anything about the positions of the entire user interface, so you should be able to follow me using Photoshop. Next up, you'll need a screenshot from the game you're using. As I said earlier, we're talking about Diablo 3. To create a screenshot in Diablo 3, simply enter the game and press the print key on your keyboard. The print key is set by default to take a screenshot. The screenshot is then saved in the Documents folder of your user under Documents Diablo 3 Screenshots. When you take your screenshot, make sure that all of the visual elements that should be on screen are actually on screen the time you take the screenshots. I'm talking about things like the buff and debuff icons down here, the followers up here, and the quest objective information to the right around here. You need these elements to make sure you don't block them actually with your overlay, because your streaming audience would want to see those things on screen. So make sure you have these activated and then simply take a screenshot in the resolution you play your game in. In addition to your screenshot, you need a couple of textures. You will need a background texture. I chose this darkish brown wooden texture. And to spice up our overlay just a little bit, I also found these little frame textures that we can use as a frame, for example for our webcam or our minimap or wherever we want to use them. In addition, I also use these notes for the information about the music that is currently playing on the stream. I will include links to where I found these exact things in the description of the video. Of course, if you don't like my choices, you can simply Google by yourself and find textures you think are more appropriate. Now that we're already in setup, we can start to create our overlay. The first step is to simply drag your screenshot you took from Diablo 3 into Photoshop. I usually drag out the window a little bit so that I have this little grey frame around my image. Note that I at the moment have the grid activated. This can help you in terms of dimensions, in terms of distances, and so on and so forth. To deactivate it, simply click on View and deactivate the grid. I also have those rulers to the top and to the left activated because you can use them to create guidelines. To do this, simply click inside of the ruler, hold your left mouse button and drag the mouse downwards or rightwards respectively. Once you release the mouse button, you will create a guideline at the position you dragged your mouse towards. We will use those later. For now, the most important thing is our layers. Our layers are selected to the bottom right of Photoshop. And we always need to be in control of our layers to work on the right one, because otherwise we will screw things up. Now the first step after dragging our screenshot in is to create a new layer. You can do this by simply click on the New Layer button down to the right. I highly recommend that you rename your layers. This avoids getting confused. Simply click on Layer Properties and rename it. Let's call this new layer Base. Now make sure you have the base selected, because if you don't, you will mess things up. I'll quickly show you what might happen. If you still have the background selected and you do what we're about to do, it will look like this. We don't want that to happen. Simply delete this and make sure we select the base layer. When you have the base layer selected, select your Select tool to the top left of Photoshop and simply click in your grey frame somewhere to the top left of your screen. Then hold your left mouse button and drag your mouse all the way across our image. Remove the mouse button to select the entire thing. You can see that everything is selected by these dotted lines around our image. Now choose our Fill tool, make sure our foreground color is set to black and simply click right in the middle of the image. Now we created an entire black block. To deselect the image again, press Ctrl and D. The next step is to reduce the opacity of our black image. Go to the opacity window up here and reduce it to, let's say, 70%. Now, as you can see, our background screenshot still is visible through the black space. This black space then will be our overlay that we later on fill with textures and stuff. The next step is to cut out everything that should be seen on screen. That means everything that does not belong to the overlay we're creating. At first, this means obviously the main portion of the screen where the game is going on. Choose your Select tool again. Make sure it is set to subtract from your selection up here. It should be the third one from the right. And select all of the spaces on your screen that you actually want to cut out. At first, I recommend to work rather roughly, because you can do the fine-tuning later on. Let's select this portion of the game and simply press Delete to cut it out. This will now not longer be blocked by our overlay. Press Ctrl D to deselect, and then just start over and over again until you have everything cut out that you want to cut out. Let's quickly drag up our overlay that we want to achieve to make sure we take the right decisions when we cut out things. This is the overlay we want. Down to the right, we will have our webcam. Down to the left, we will have a logo and information about the music currently playing in this box. In here is the user interface of Diablo 3, up here is our minimap, and up here is the quest information that is displayed to the right. So we need to cut out all of these spaces that are white on this screen. To do this, I will use a couple of guidelines. The first one I'll draw, let's take this a little bit bigger. The first guideline I will draw will kind of frame the minimap. This is where the minimap ends. I set my guideline down here. I will draw another guideline at the bottom edge of the minimap and another one at the bottom edge of our objective box, like this. Then I will set a frame to the right side. To do this, I will first select our grid again. Our border to the right will have more or less the space of one of those grids, like this. Let's do the same to the left, like this. And then make sure we select the space for our webcam. My webcam isn't a perfect square but rectangular, hence I will create a rectangular space for our webcam. Not from the very bottom, let's leave another frame down here, but slightly higher than this. Let's say this is where our webcam will end. And now we need a couple of further guidelines for the framing of the webcam. I'll adjust one here, and I'll adjust one to the side of the cam, like this. Let's deactivate the grid again, because it's confusing. Now it looks like this. Note that now we have a couple of guidelines. If you choose too many, you might get confused. However, I like having a lot of guidelines. If this is confusing for you, just choose less guidelines or do them step by step. Now that all of this is actually created, let's start cutting out again. This will be the left edge of our frame in our overlay. Zoom out again and start cutting away. We don't need this bit of black space any longer, so we simply cut it out. Deselect, press Ctrl D. We don't need the inner space in between our webcam and our objective box, so I'll cut this out as well, like this. Note that I leave the frame to the right to somehow connect the bottom and the top portion of the overlay. This will be the frame of our webcam. Now, what else is needed to do? We need to cut out the overlay to the bottom on top of our user interface down here. So let's zoom in again and let's decide how far up our overlay should actually reach to the left side. I will choose another guideline and bring it down all the way to here. Zoom out again and start cutting away. Make sure to not cut away the frame of your webcam. So start here and drag it all the way to the left. Delete and deselect. Now the basic frame of our overlay is created. What we have to do next is to reduce the overlay down here, because we don't want to hide these icons. That means we need to cut out a bit of the overlay in here. To do this, we zoom in again and create yet another couple of guidelines. I will put a guideline right here at the edge of this graphical construction and do the same on the other side of the user interface. From there on, I create two more guidelines. I will choose this thorn on the interface as my point of focus, put a guideline there, and do the same on the other side, like this. Now I want to cut away a space diagonally from here to here. To do this, I select the polygon lasso tool and zoom in a little bit further. I start cutting away right on top of my right guideline and the top edge of the user interface. Like this. Then I drag down diagonally to here and cut up all the way across here. Simply bring back the tool to the starting point and click again. Now this thing is selected. Actually, that's wrong. I don't want to do this. I need another guideline because I forgot that I want my overlay on top of here. Drag down from the top and put a guideline right below those two icons down here, like this. There we go. This is where I want my interface to be. And from there on, I can start cutting this out. Do this again. Take my polygon lasso, click on this corner, now click on that corner, and then simply go all the way over to here. Click on that corner and click on that corner. Then I simply go up here and finish my selection by clicking on the starting point. As you can see now, the entire inner space of this is selected. If I hit delete, I'll cut it out. Press Ctrl and D to deselect and zoom out again. Now the outer frame of our overlay is cut out. Now we need to start to cut out everything inside of the overlay that should actually be visible. To do this, go back to your selection tool and start selecting the things you want to cut out. Let's start at the top with our minimap. Our minimap is from this guideline up here to down here. Press delete and cut it out. Ctrl D to deselect. I want to cut out the information about where we actually are, like this. Delete, Ctrl D to deselect. After that, I want to cut out our objectives box all the way down here. Make sure we leave a frame on the bottom end, like this. Cut it out, Ctrl D to deselect. The next step is to cut out our webcam. To cut out our webcam, we need to select... Oh, wait a second. I just noticed something. Our interface reaches all the way up here. So we need to make sure that we don't block this with our webcam. Let's do it like this. There we go. Now we cut out our webcam on the insides of this box, like this. Press delete, Ctrl D to deselect. And then we go on to cut out our user interface. This is a bit more tedious work because you have to make sure that you cut it out according to its shape. To do this, yet again, select your polygon lasso tool, zoom in quite closely, and start following the outline of the user interface with your lasso. To do this, I will get rid of our guidelines and start right down to the bottom of the user interface. Use your lasso to piece by piece click alongside the contour of the user interface. The more clicks you use, the more precise it will get. Note that the lasso tool somewhat follows the outline already, but if you choose too long lines like this, it won't work. So go step by step to cut it all out appropriately and according to the interface. You can do repair afterwards if you do things wrong. This is the most tedious part of this overlay, and it might take a couple of minutes. There we go, almost there. Finish this down here. And once we reach the bottom, go all the way back to the right and connect it to your starting point. Now, if I zoom out again, you can see that the entire user interface down here is selected. Press delete to cut it all out. There we go. If you haven't been working very precisely, you can now attempt to repair a couple of things by zooming in even closer and to cut out or replace all the spots you missed or cut out too much. There you go. The only thing we need to cut out now is a spot for our music information. To do this, simply select the selection tool again, bring our guidelines back, and start cutting away a rectangular field up here, like this. Cut it out, and there we go. Remove our guidelines again, and zoom out to full screen. Now we have the basic shape of our overlay cut out. If I disable our background, it will look like this. The next step involves putting on a texture on this, because a simple black block doesn't look pretty. To do this, select the texture, the wooden texture, that we actually acquired beforehand, and drag it into Photoshop. There we go, this is the texture. Make it bigger. And the next step involves simply selecting the entire texture again and copy the entire thing by pressing Ctrl and C. Switch back to your overlay and now press Ctrl and V to paste the entire thing. Obviously now we don't see anything. Rename this layer again, I'll call it texture. There we go. And click on this little eye button on the left to hide it from view. Now make sure you select your base layer again and select the wand tool. With the wand tool we can now simply select all of the sections of our screen that we want to cut out of the texture. Start by your main window in here, then press and hold your Shift key and click on all the things we just cut out. This box, our user interface, our webcam, our objectives box, our minimap, and our information up here. Then select your texture layer again and blend it in. You can still see our selection up here. Now simply press delete and everything will be cut out. Press Ctrl and D to deselect. Now we have our texture on top of our overlay. It starts to look promising. To spice it all up, we can now add a little bit of layer options. Hide the texture from view and select your base layer. Right click on the layer and choose the options up here. What we want to do is, we want a drop shadow, like this, and we want an outer glow, like this. Make it a little bit bigger. I chose 8 pixels and select a different color. I will choose a rather bright red, like this. Click OK, click OK, and now bring your texture layer back into view. As you can see, our red glow is still there. The next step involves adding our logo. If you don't have a logo, you can simply use the text tool of Photoshop, like this. Click in here and write down your logo. You can then select this, choose a different color, and be done with it. However, I have my own logo, which I created earlier for other projects, and I will use this one. To do this, I simply import my logo into Photoshop, like this, cut it out, selecting Ctrl+C, switching back to our project, Ctrl+V. If you have things like that, you need to resize them. To do this, you simply press Ctrl and T to activate this frame. Then hold Shift on your keyboard and resize it, like this. Press Enter to accept it. Then choose your Move tool up here, click on the logo and drag it where you want. Now, as you can see, we can't see it because it is hidden behind our texture. To change this, simply move this layer to the very top, and there it is. Rename the layer, call it logo, here we go, and adjust it in the way we want. Put it in the right place, like this, resize it a little bit again, like this, move it down a little bit, and there we go, there's our logo. Now, to add a final nice and easy touch and to show you what you can do with advanced graphics that you can either find on the internet or you can create yourself if you have advanced Photoshop skills, we can use a little frame around our webcam area. To do this, I will use the frame texture that we downloaded earlier. When you downloaded it from the same source as I do, it looks like this. Now, we can't use it like this because it has a white background. To get rid of this, we simply cut it out by selecting it, pressing Ctrl and C, and then creating a new project. The new project now should have the size of the area we selected here. Like this, press Ctrl and V to insert it. Oh, I still have a white background and I know why. Again, new, like this. Make sure your background is transparent and create your project and import your cutout thing. Now, take your wand tool, select all the white spaces and simply press delete. You also need to get rid of all of those things in here, the gray spaces. In here, in here, like this, and the axe in here. Press Ctrl D to deselect and copy the entire thing by pressing Ctrl and C while having it selected. Now simply switch back to our overlay project, press Ctrl V, and there it is. And now you can do the same thing you did with your logo before that. Press Ctrl T to resize it, hold your Shift key, make it smaller, press Enter, and use your movement tool to drag it where you actually want it. I want it to frame our webcam window like this. As you can see, every element we drag into our project like this automatically creates a new layer. I rename this to frame 1, and to get my second one, I won't do this entire procedure again. I simply right click on my frame 1, use duplicate layer, call it frame 2, and there you go. Frame 2 is selected. You can't see it because it's in the exact same position as our first frame. To change this, make sure your selection, your movement tool is selected and simply drag it away. Now we have to rotate the thing to put it down here. Do this by pressing Ctrl and T again, holding Shift, move your mouse to the corner until this icon shows up, and then simply rotate it around as needed. Press enter. To accept your selection, use the movement tool and drag it into the right location, like this. You can use additional graphical enhancements to your overlay if you want, but you need to create them first or find them on the internet. Now we can make these a little bit prettier by using our layer options again, giving them a bit of a contour, a bit of a shadow. Now we leave that away. A bit of a glow effect, like this. And do the same for our frame 2. Contour, glow. My glow is black. That's why it works this way. And we can do the same thing for our logo. Do it like this, to give it a more gritty look, like it is pinned onto our overlay. Now, the final thing we need to do is get our musical notes into the picture. To do this, simply drag your notes that you saved somewhere on your screen into Photoshop and do the same procedure you did with the framing icons before that. That means select your note, press Ctrl C to copy it, create a new document, press Ctrl V to paste it, make sure the background is transparent, use your wand tool, click on the white stuff, press delete, there you go, Ctrl D to deselect, select the entire thing, Ctrl C to copy, switch to our project, Ctrl V to paste, Ctrl T to resize, like this, press enter, use your movement tool and drag it into position, like this. Still a bit big, make it a bit slightly tinier, and there we go. Rename this to music and use all of those options as well, like this. There you go. Our overlay now is pretty much finished. The only thing left to do is get rid of our background. You can now simply delete this layer by selecting it, pressing the delete key, and there you have it. All you have to do now is save your project, and then you can use it with your XSplit, your OBS, whatever streaming software you use. I highly recommend to save it both as a Photoshop project, so you can easily edit and modify it if needed, and then again save it a second time, choose Save As, and save it as a PNG to actually use it in your streaming software. There you have it. You just created your own personal overlay for the game Diablo 3. You can obviously use the same techniques to create an overlay for any other game. Have fun using your overlays on stream, and thank you for watching. Take care everybody. FZN out.